There are stories in human history that do not begin with bloodshed or war, but with a quiet, icy question that feels almost terrifying. If everything you have were taken away, what would you have left? Not losing a part of it, not losing it little by little. Losing it all. Your wealth, your children, your health, your honor, your community, and finally even the presence of the people around you. In that moment, the thing we often call faith is tested. Does it still stand, or does it collapse like a house built on sand? Try to picture someone who was once seen as a symbol of blessing. Wealthy, respected, living among people who admired him. The kind of person whose name immediately brings to mind protection, generosity, and righteousness. Then without warning and without any sign, everything begins to be pulled away. Not by an enemy, not by random disaster, but by the very one who had given it all in the first place. This is not the collapse of a failed man. This is the beginning of a test that only a few souls in all of human history could ever carry. The story of Prophet Ayyub, peace be upon him, is not a story about illness as many people assume. Illness is only the outer layer. This story is about the moment faith is stripped of every shield. When prosperity no longer proves that Allah loves you. When family is no longer there to lean on. When society no longer looks at you with respect. When your own body becomes a burden. And then, in that silence, the most frightening question rises. Is Allah still there? Many people believe when they are given blessings, but believing when everything is taken away is what exposes the true nature of faith. And that is exactly why this story exists. Not for us to admire a prophet from the past, but to face ourselves in the present. Because deep inside every human being is the fear that one day the life we know will fall apart. And when that day comes, how will we respond? Ayyub, peace be upon him, was not chosen because he was weak. He was chosen because he was strong enough to stand completely exposed before the trial without turning away. When blessings remain, gratitude is easy to say. But when blessings disappear, gratitude becomes a painful choice. And it is right there that this story separates itself from so many others. This is not a simple moral lesson. This is a surgery on faith, peeling back layer after layer until only the raw bond between a human being and Allah remains. Before Ayyub, peace be upon him, even lost his health, he faced a much harder test to recognize, the test of no longer being measured by what he owned. When people look at you and no longer see worth, do you still see your worth before Allah? When reputation fades, when respect turns into fear and avoidance, what do you lean on to keep standing? Right there, faith stops being an abstract concept. It becomes the single thin thread keeping the soul from falling into despair. Maybe what makes this story so haunting is not what Ayyub, peace be upon him, suffered, but what he did not do. He did not curse. He did not ask accusing questions. He did not demand explanations. While most people begin to doubt after losing only a small piece of their lives, Ayyub walked into total loss without losing direction. And that silence made Iblis fail from the very beginning, even before he delivered his final blow. Welcome to Prophetic History Explained. This is not just a channel that retells the history of the prophets. It is where stories that seem distant are reflected into the very modern pains we carry today. If you have ever felt like too much has been taken from you, if you have ever wondered why trials seem to aim straight at you, then this story is not appearing in front of you by accident. But pause here for a beat, because what you have heard so far is only the first doorway. The real trials, the deepest strikes, and the lessons that force the heart into silent reflection are still ahead. If you want to go to the end of this story, if you want to understand why Ayyub, peace be upon him, was chosen by Allah as a symbol of patience for all humanity, subscribe to Prophetic History Explained to support us. Your support is what gives us the strength to tell these unfinished stories all the way through, all the way to an ending you will not forget. The trials of Prophet Ayyub, peace be upon him, did not hit like a violent storm that wiped everything out in a single moment. They came slowly in order, like tightening rings that loosen and then tighten again, layer by layer, enough to make an ordinary person collapse very early on. And that is exactly what exposes the nature of faith, because it does not allow quick reactions or impulsive emotion. It forces a person to live with loss, to wake up each day to an emptiness bigger than yesterday. The first layer of the trial struck what people usually see as proof of success: wealth, property, livelihood. For many, and that is the foundation of safety. But for Ayyub, peace be upon him, it was only a tool. When those tools were taken away, he did not see a plot and he did not see injustice. He saw a simple truth: the one who gives has the right to take back. This trial was not aimed at ego, but at attachment. Was his heart attached to what he owned or not? The answer was shown not through argument, but through calm steadiness. When the first layer did not achieve what Iblis wanted, the second layer came immediately, heavier and more direct. Children are not possessions. They are continuation, hope, the future. Losing children is not only losing their presence, but losing dreams that never had time to form. Here, the trial was no longer a measure of gratitude, but a measure of surrender. The heart can break, but does it still face the same direction? Ayyub, peace be upon him, hurt like any father would. But his pain did not turn into rebellion. He allowed himself to grieve, but he did not allow grief to take over his faith. The next layer was far more subtle because it did not strike what was lost, but how people saw him. When the society that once honored him began to fear him, when respect became distance, the trial shifted from material to psychological. Being avoided does not cause instant pain, but it slowly eats away at the sense of belonging. For Ayyub, peace be upon him, this was the first time he had to face a brutally honest truth. People's affection is conditional, and those conditions can disappear at any moment. But this trial also carried a reminder. A person's real worth is not in the eyes of the crowd, but in their place before Allah. When those tightening rings still did not knock faith off course, the final trial reached the body. Illness did not come to finish him quickly. It came to stretch out the suffering. Day after day, year after year, the body weakened, turning endurance into everyday life. This is the most dangerous kind of trial because it wears down the will through repetition. There is no dramatic peak, no clear ending, only mornings that begin with the same pain and nights that end with the same unanswered question. Iblis understood this strategy well. He did not need a fatal strike. He needed exhaustion to accumulate. He needed time to do the work that violence could not. He whispered not through direct insults, but through questions that sounded reasonable. Why does this trial last so long? Why is your patience not answered? But every one of those questions crashed into a solid wall. The understanding that not every answer belongs to this world. What is striking is that at every layer, Ayyub, peace be upon him, did not respond with a new plan. He did not change his worship. He did not negotiate. He did not look for shortcuts. His response remained the same, and that very consistency was what Iblis could not break. When patience lasts a short season, it is endurance. When patience lasts for years, it becomes a life direction. These trials were not meant to prove that Ayyub, peace be upon him, was stronger than everyone else. They were meant to show that true faith is not dependent on circumstances. When circumstances change, faith does not need to adapt because it was never built on circumstances in the first place. And that is why this story is not trapped in history. Because every person at some point will face similar tightening rings, even if the forms are different. And the question is always the same. What will the heart hold on to when each layer of support is taken away? There are pains that leave no mark on the body but carve so deeply into the soul that a person never forgets. The pain of being turned away by people. Not in a loud explosion, but in prolonged silence. No one attacks. No one curses. Doors simply close, eyes avoid, footsteps stop coming back. And here, the trial of Prophet Ayyub, peace be upon him, enters a deeper level where illness is no longer the center and isolation becomes the real blade. Ayyub, peace be upon him, used to be the one people ran to. His home was once a refuge for the poor, a support for those with nowhere to go. But when illness dragged on and his appearance changed, hearts began to change too. Respect slowly gave way to fear. Closeness became distance. People whispered that the illness might spread, that being near him was dangerous. And so, one by one, they withdrew. No one said goodbye. No one faced him to explain. They simply vanished from his life. This was not obvious cruelty. It was a more delicate kind of harm, hidden under the name of self-protection. No one believed they were doing wrong, but for the one left at the center of that turning away, every day became a silent message. You are a burden now. Something people do not want to see. When a community stops seeing you as a person and starts seeing you as a threat, the trial has moved beyond the body. The moment Ayyub, peace be upon him, and his wife were forced out of the city was the peak of that pain. A man who had sheltered thousands was now driven away by them. No helping hand, no voice defending him, only the heavy silence of the crowd watching, and fear turning their faces away. Being driven out is not only losing a home, it is losing the right to belong, losing the right to exist among people. Right there, Ayyub, peace be upon him, said something that makes his story feel close to every era. When asked what was hardest through all those long years, he did not mention wounds, hunger, or physical pain. He said what hurt most was people's words and their distance. A short sentence that anyone who has been betrayed, abandoned, or misunderstood recognizes instantly. Because a person can endure physical pain when they know they are not alone. But when pain comes with isolation, when there is no witness and no one to share it with, it becomes a burden many times heavier. For Ayyub, peace be upon him, this trial did not only test patience, it tested the deepest relationship of all, the relationship between a human being and Allah when no one else remains. In that isolation, there is a danger Iblis always waits for. The moment when a person begins to confuse their worth with how others treat them. When someone is left alone long enough, they can start believing they are no longer lovable, no longer worth hearing. And once that thought enters the heart, it can destroy faith from the inside. But Ayyub, peace be upon him, did not allow that to happen. He did not measure his worth by society's gaze, but by his closeness to Allah. Being cut off from the community did not make Allah feel farther away. If anything, when people withdrew, the only bond left became clearer than ever. In the silence of a small shelter outside the city, Ayyub, peace be upon him, was no longer distracted by praise or criticism. No social role to maintain, no image to protect, only a heart facing its creator directly. And in that rawness, his faith did not weaken. It became purer. The pain of abandonment taught Ayyub, peace be upon him, something very few people learn while life is full. Human beings can never be the final support. Their emotions can change. Their presence can disappear. Their backing can be withdrawn at any moment. But Allah does not abandon. Even when every door closes, that door remains open. And that is why, even when he was stripped of society, Ayyub, peace be upon him, was never stripped of the meaning of his life. This story touches a very modern pain. Today, many people are not severely ill and have not lost everything financially, yet they still feel lonely in the middle of crowds. They are pushed out of relationships, judged, placed on the margins, and like Ayyub, peace be upon him, their trial is not in the outer circumstances, but in a quiet, inner question. When no one stands beside me, what will I stand on? When everyone had left, when familiar footsteps no longer returned, when the community that once supported him turned into cold silence, the story of Prophet Ayyub, peace be upon him, did not end in loneliness. Because amid human withdrawal, there was a presence that did not disappear. Rahima stayed, and her staying opened another layer of meaning and faith, in one rarely discussed yet incredibly demanding: the faith of the companion. Rahima did not stay because she had no other option. She could have left, like many others did. No one would have blamed her if she chose safety for herself. No one forced her to carry a sick husband who was avoided and seen as a danger. But Rahima did not measure her decision by convenience or short-term survival. She measured it by her relationship with Allah. And in that measure, leaving was never an option. Her patience was not shown through speeches or grand statements. It was shown through repeated actions, quiet and wearing. Long days of hard labor to exchange for a little food. The walk back to the small shelter outside the city after dark, caring for a body that was no longer strong, no longer responsive, no longer offering any guarantee of a secure future. Her patience was not in dramatic moments, but in steady consistency that no one saw. If Ayyub's trial, peace be upon him, was enduring loss, Rahima's trial was carrying the consequences of that loss every day. She did not only lose comfort, she lost social standing, respect, and safety. She entered the same isolation, but in a different way. Not as the one directly abandoned, but as the one who willingly stepped into the abandoned place so her husband would not be there alone. Iblis understood this well. When he could not break Ayyub, peace be upon him, the quickest path was to shake Rahima. He did not appear in a frightening form. He appeared through whispers that sounded reasonable. He targeted exhaustion, fear, and a very human question. Is this sacrifice worth it? Is a woman truly obligated to trade her entire life for a trial with no clear end? But Rahima did not answer with arguments. She answered with loyalty. She did not see staying as a dramatic sacrifice, but as the natural consequence of love and faith. She did not ask when the trial would end. She did what was right today, then repeated it tomorrow. And that refusal to place conditions made every scheme meaningless. A profound point in this story is often missed. Rahima's faith did not depend on results. She did not stay because she knew healing would come. She did not serve because she expected a visible reward. For years, there was no sign that anything would be restored. And that is what made her patience so pure. When faith is no longer supported by a specific hope, it can only stand if it is truly sincere. Rahima also faced a very real fear, the fear of being forgotten. While others continued their lives inside the city, she lived on the outskirts in a place no one wanted to see. But being forgotten by people did not make her feel invisible to Allah. If anything, in that invisibility, every action became clearer in the measure of the Creator. When society's eyes disappear and only Allah's gaze remains, a person's motives are fully revealed. Rahima's story shows a rare kind of faith. Faith not fed by recognition. In today's world, many people can only continue when they receive acknowledgement, praise, or at least understanding. Rahima had none of that. She continued in silence. And that silence became a testimony stronger than any lecture. When we speak of Ayyub's patience, peace be upon him, we often forget that it did not exist in a vacuum. It was surrounded, supported, and reflected by the patience of the one beside him. Rahima is not a side character. She is a moral pillar, proof that faith is tested not only in personal pain, but also in carrying someone else's pain without leaving them. Staying in this story is not weakness. Staying is the hardest choice. And that choice carved Rahima's name into history as a model of living faith, quiet, unshowy, yet so steady that no force could break it. There is a moment in the story of Prophet Ayyub, peace be upon him, that is easy to misunderstand if you do not listen closely. It is the moment he finally makes supplication. For a long time he endured in silence, to the point that many people ask why he did not ask Allah to end the pain sooner. But that delay is the key to understanding the meaning of healing. Ayyub, peace be upon him, was not silent out of pride and not out of mindless resignation. He was silent because he understood that not every suffering needs to be removed immediately. Some trials do not come to destroy, but to complete an inner mission inside a person. If the trial has not finished its work, asking for the pain to end can cause someone to miss what Allah is building in the heart. When Ayyub, peace be upon him, finally spoke his supplication, it did not sound like complaint, and it was not a cry of despair. It was a humble admission. Harm has touched me, and you are the most merciful. There was no specific demand, no conditions, no question of why. In that supplication, he did not place himself at the center. He placed the attributes of Allah at the center. And that shift is what made the supplication timeless. Healing did not come as a reward for endurance. It came as a marker that the trial had finished its work. When Allah commanded Ayyub, peace be upon him, to act, it was not only the restoration of his body, but the restoration of balance between human beings and blessings. The body was healed, but more importantly, faith remained intact after passing through every layer of trial. The restoration of Ayyub, peace be upon him, was not a simple return to the old life. It was an elevation. Health was returned, family was expanded, blessings were multiplied, honor was restored. But what matters most is Ayyub's response when blessings came back. He did not treat that as proof that the trial had ended with a happy ending. He saw it as another expression of Allah's generosity, no more and no less than the painful years that came before. Here is a point many people misunderstand in spiritual life. Some think patience only matters if it leads to a good outcome in this world. But Ayyub, peace be upon him, was not patient in order to be healed. He was patient because it was the only way to keep his bond with Allah from breaking. If healing came, it was a blessing. If it did not, faith still had to stand. That posture freed him from being dependent on outcomes. After he was restored, there is a small but deeply meaningful detail that is often overlooked. Ayyub, peace be upon him, cried, not from pain, but because he no longer heard the familiar call he used to hear during his years of illness. And this reveals a truth that modern people need to pause over. Sometimes the hardest days are the days when a person feels divine closeness most clearly. When the trial passes, comfort can quietly loosen that focus. The story of Ayyub, peace be upon him, does not end with wealth or health. It ends with a quiet lesson. Blessings are not always proof of closeness, and trials are not always proof of distance. Both can be paths that lead a person to Allah if the heart keeps the right direction. For the listener today, the ending is not a promise that every suffering will be solved in this life. It is a deeper warning. The most dangerous wound is not the wound on the body, but the wound that makes a person doubt, complain, and turn away inwardly. Ayyub, peace be upon him, lost almost everything, but he did not lose the one thing that cannot be recovered once it is dropped, his connection to Allah. And that is the lasting value of this story. Bodies will weaken, wealth will change owners, relationships will change. But if a person keeps a heart that knows how to return, then whether in trial or in blessing, they remain standing. True healing is not only the end of pain, it is passing through pain without losing direction. And that is the greatest legacy Prophet Ayyub, peace be upon him, leaves for anyone still walking through their own trials. The greatest lesson from the life of Prophet Ayyub, peace be upon him, is this: Trials are not measured by how much they hurt, but by how the heart responds. When loss comes, a person has two choices: either allow pain to become resentment, doubt, and bitterness, or allow pain to become a reminder that this world was never meant to be the final support. Ayyub chose the second path, not because he did not feel pain, but because he understood that if the heart turns away, then even a healed body is still a loss. Apply this lesson to life today. Whenever we lose something, pause before complaining. Ask yourself, what is this testing in me? Attachment to wealth, dependence on people, or the belief that everything must happen according to my plan? When illness comes, do not only ask for the pain to stop, ask that your heart does not drift away from Allah. When you are misunderstood or abandoned, do not measure your worth by how people treat you. Measure it by your standing before your Creator. And when blessings return, be careful that comfort does not loosen the bond that was built in the hardest days. If this story touches a pain that feels deeply personal, remember that you are not alone. Millions before us have walked through similar trials, and the prophets left us the clearest living examples so we would not lose our way. Join the Prophetic History Explained community so we can keep learning together about the lives of the prophets, the deep lessons of faith, patience, trials, and healing, and how to apply those values in modern life. And if you want to support us so we can continue producing high-quality content, subscribe to Prophetic History Explained today. Your companionship is how these stories of light continue to be told and reach more hearts.